Hello and welcome. My name is Merrie McGraw, and I'm the engineering lead for the Windows Forms team here at Microsoft. And we've got
Klaus Loeffelman, however you want to pronounce it. I'm so glad I have my little dots this time.
I was very careful about putting those on there, Klaus.
I'm a senior software engineer on the WinForms team. And yeah, I'm also very passionate about what we're doing. So
yep, it's kind of dream job-ish, isn't it? Being able to fix, make WinForms what we've always wanted it to be.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been doing that for quite a while, and was, I think, an MVP for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And then you took me over the fence.
Yep, I dragged you over. I've been working with Microsoft for almost 20 years now. And before that, I was a software developer trainer for the certification programs that Microsoft had way back in pre-.NET Framework 2.0 days. When I got the opportunity to join Visual Studio's servicing team here at Microsoft, I jumped at it and have been working in various .NET Framework technologies ever since then. And a few years ago, I got the opportunity to bring WinForms on board back when it was considered dead.
No, in service.
Servicing only mode. We'll call it servicing only mode. And a couple of years later, we got the request from the community to bring WinForms open source and add it to the .NET Core product, so to speak. And that around that time is when we brought Klaus on board and kind of filled out the team. And now we're really able to make WinForms a potentially modern development platform, not just, legacy servicing stuff only. You can actually do what I would like to consider modern WinForms applications. Quick survey slide. Make sure that at some point during the presentation, or after the presentation probably, that you do the survey, because the feedback is very important to us in two fronts. First of we obviously want to know what works and doesn't work from the presentation standpoint, but we also want to know what you want to see in WinForms, because now that it's open source, now that it's in .NET, we're able to actually kind of act on some of those requests and make the changes that we're all looking for. So our agenda today is really kind of talking about what I consider a modern WinForms app. And it really has a few pillars in it that may be a little bit different than they were 10 years ago when WinForms was, or 15 years ago when WinForms was the thing to be developing with.
25 years ago.
I'm not going to accept that it was 25 years ago. So what a modern WinForms app is to me is, number one, it's secure, because security is absolutely kind of paramount right now, not just for Microsoft, but for the entire enterprise development, for the entire world in development. We also want to have a little bit more of a modern UI look and feel than, say, the old Windows 95 or Windows XP kind of looks. And we want to do that from within WinForms itself. We want our applications to be accessible. And this is something that I'm personally very passionate about, and I make sure that I include, because WinForms wasn't always really accessible. When somebody that needed to use an assistive technology like Narrator or NVDA or JAWS, we just weren't good at it. So a modern WinForms app needs to be accessible. Responsive and performant, particularly when we're talking about a lot of asynchronous calls nowadays to to web APIs or to semantic kernel.
Semantic kernel, exactly.
All of those things.
But also projection of Windows.
Yes.
When we pull in the Windows APIs, which we can do in WinForms.
And so we want to make sure that we're responsive and performant in those cases. And then, of course, the whole world is API and Copilot connected. So that, to us, is a modern WinForms app. And we're going to take a deeper dive into each one of these areas with demos and code throughout, letting you see kind of what we've been up to. We're also going to give you some sneak peeks into experimental features that are coming in .NET 9. These we were getting in early under an experimental flag. And that's so that you, as the developers, can take a first crack at them, give us feedback, and we can really have the best .NET 10 version of these features that we've been working on. And then, of course, Q&A. We will definitely, one of us, run around the audience and answer any questions that come up.
So one thing that just came to my mind when I looked at the agenda is when we take a look at modern UI look and feel, then we should make clear that we don't want to compete against WinUI and we don't want to compete WPF, right? I mean, when we're saying modernize UI in WinForm's app, it's like, let's put it that way, primarily motivated by good accessibility.
Good practices for accessibility and kind of living the WinForms way where we are trying to expose the operating system in a simple and manageable way and looking like we fit in with the operating system.
Exactly.
All right. So let's go ahead and start with security, because that is on top of everybody's mind right now. And with security, the really big thing that's happening in .NET 9 that everybody needs to be aware of is that the implementation details for binary formatter are being removed from the runtime itself and moved out into a new, what we call OOB package. So in .NET 8 and even earlier for some workloads, binary formatter was disabled. But what we realized very clearly was that WinForms has a deep dependency on on binary formatter for serialization, for resources, for just any number of things that we need in the design experience, et cetera. Clipboard and OLE would be a really big part of where we use binary formatter. In .NET 8, what we did was we kind of tried to take a little bit of a proactive approach, and we replaced a lot of the internal places where we would have used binary formatter for internal serialization. And we said, no, we're going to change that implementation. We created basically an API that we used internally that is now being used, actually ported out to the entire runtime, called the .NET Runtime Binary Format Reader, the NRBF reader. And that's pretty exciting because one of my devs, Jeremy, did a lot of work to kind of shepherd this project along so that it is the least impactful to the WinForms ecosystem as possible.
Yes.
So we know that we can't predict everything. Binary formatter is something that is available as a fallback kind of last resort option. And that's why they have the OOB package that you'll just need to manually pull in to reference binary formatter. What I want to do is kind of talk a little bit more about the binary formatter and how WinForms is approaching this problem. And I kind of alluded to it in the last slide. We really needed it in the past, in the design time experience, especially for serializing resources and deserializing resources. In the runtime, we use it for like OLE and drag and drop scenarios. We need to deserialize, and we don't know what you're dropping into our application. So we were using binary formatter as the, let's go, let's just do something predictable. WinForms is now, like I said, in .NET 8, we started mitigating this with all of the types that we could predict. If we think you might be dragging and dropping a string, that's going to work. If we think you're going to be dragging and dropping a collection of primitive types, that's going to be fine. There's going to be no impact to you. And then if and only if you need binary formatter right now, it's available kind of as that backstop, but the recommendations to you and the documentation is getting out there. I'm going to update this deck later this afternoon with URLs that actually have the recommendations that we're publishing in .NET 9 for getting off of binary formatter. But really, the trick is to register type converters for all of the types that you work with in in your WinForms applications, and options like system text JSON for formatting your data. In the future looking side of things, we're also doing some pretty exciting work well, we'll talk about analyzers here in a second, to predict or to identify when you might accidentally be using binary formatter and why that can be problematic and what we can do to fix it. Excuse me. So the other thing is in .NET 10, we're going to allow you to have even more control over how you do serialization with the clipboard by adding APIs where you'll be able to specify, I only expect drops of X, Y, and Z type into this drop zone, so to speak. So that's coming out in the future. So let me go into my demo real quick. And yeah, Klaus makes fun of me all the time because I use the Preview Visual Studio, and I don't know, I just kind of think pink is kind of fun. What I want to show here today is where I can accidentally use binary formatter, have it serialized somewhere, and maybe that's insecure. Maybe that's leaking customer data. Maybe that's doing something that we absolutely don't want to do.
And I like to add, this is not only to not hit the binary formatter. I mean, you don't principally want have any sensitive data in your resource file or even code serialized and then probably checked in just by accident. And that's what that scenario is also about, right?
Yep. So what I've got here is this amazing app that I spent hours on, let me tell you. Yeah. Application where I've got a custom control. And this is a .NET 8 application, by the way. And in this .NET 8 application, I've got my address control. And if we go down to custom properties here, and let me do a zoom so you can see what we've got. There's the properties for first name, last name, address, city, state, zip, and then one that you don't even see in the designer. I'm calling it special property. Let me see. Let me start typing in here.
And actually seeing that customer data now in the properties windows should already, raise red flags. And Merrie's going to show why that is the case. Super
secret information. And I'll leave off the zip code. I don't think it's terribly important. I'm going to save here. And if you notice, in my Git changes, I've got a change for the resx file. When I go to the resx file, what you're going to see is that I have serialized this value, the super secret property, right there. And that, again, should be an alarm bell because I needed it for something in the design time of my, or even the runtime of my application, but I didn't want to serialize that information.
So, and obviously this is a very staged and emphasized example. But what happens if you design business controls? So not so much the custom controls that, everybody on your team works with, but when you have business controls, line of business controls that are enclosing and displaying parts of a form that get then customized at runtime, principally the same can happen. But I mean, this was on purpose, right? We immediately saw that. I mean, there were even the properties that we entered in the property browser. But what often happens is that we're pulling in, because the UI is so complex, we're pulling in just a few test data. And then those controls, so that we can see the controls at design time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those data just, slip out. They are, not only being displayed, but then all of a sudden they are at design time, held by the properties. And this is what exactly then also happens.
You
wouldn't notice it. And it happens so often that you all of a sudden have a series of properties that are serializing and you didn't want it, but you just never notice it. And you find the data in the resource files, and they can even get binary serialized. So that just the data itself is there is really not a good thing. And we need to prevent WinForm's app from that, accidentally happen.
So let me, if I build this, everything should be happy and able to be run. I'm not going to bother running it. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pop this over to, as you saw, everything built fine, no problems there. I'm going to move this over to .NET 9. I've got the latest update of .NET 9. And when I try to build, I have, where's my errors? I need to save it. Rebuild. Every once in a while, sometimes it's been taking a little bit of time for these analyzers to show up. There we go. So as you can see, and let me zoom in on those for you. As you can see, we've got a couple of properties that now have an analyzer that's telling me that we aren't configuring the code serialization for this particular control. So I'm going to go ahead and head over to the actual properties that are problematic. Here's my special property. And I get some suggestions. Thank you very much, Klaus. And these suggestions here are, and this is the one that will prevent the serialization, obviously, is add designer serialization property, visible attributes. There we go. And we set it to hidden. And let me just go through the rest of them real quick and do that. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. What are some other options, Klaus, if I don't want to not, if this isn't the way I want to deal with it?
So, I mean, the obvious thing that you want to do is you just want this from, prevent from happening. But I mean, sometimes you really want to control how the serialization is going. So that means that the analyzers that are running here also detect the other scenarios. So we have default values, for example. If you have
a default value for your
If you have a default value for like a primitive type, then you put just the default attribute on top of the property, and then the analyzers are satisfied with that. The other thing is, it's a little bit more complex, and it's not that well known. It's more like when you're really developing more complex custom controls. You can implement a method which is called should serialize, and then the property name, which is returning a Boolean. And when that property is there, it will be, when that method is there, actually, then it will be called at serialization time, so at design time by the designer. And then
it will
that method will then determine by returning true or false if the content of the property is going to be serialized. This is the third option. So if either of those things or all of the things are there, then the analyzer is fine and won't fail the compilation. Well, now I already hearing in my mind, but does it mean that when I move now from .NET 8 to .NET 9 that all of a sudden I have 6,000 errors? Yes, you will. But I mean, obviously, those are configurable. I mean, there's the option to use the editor config to say what the scope of those analyzers will be, and that's an easy thing to configure. You can even configure it directly from the analyzer's pop-up menu from the UI in Visual Studio in the editor, and just let it insert the editor config if none is there, and then it also just configures that property as, rather the analyzers as you want to have it. So should it be a warning? Should it be silent so that it doesn't break your build?
But at the same time, as we're upgrading to .NET 9, and we know that security is a high priority for us and for our businesses, that's why we made it a build break by default.
Exactly. And so also this is the beginning. So this will be the first step because it's in the context of the binary serializer. And that was, to us, was the most important part that we need to have in. But once we have WinForm's specific analyzers in place, and that we will have with .NET 9.
Now we get to
remember,
play.
Those are part of the WinForm's runtime, and they're open source. So this will be kind of a thing where we can add on, analyzers for security, for feature discoverability, for convenience. where we can also then, easily discover or ramping new people up that are, dealing with WinForms with things that are not so well known. For example, when we take a look at customer apps, we often find that when forms are shown, then it's fine. I mean, they let the form dispose, and that's the way you do it. But for a modal dialog, right, you need to dispose. You have to use using, or you need to dispose a modal dialog by yourself. Otherwise, it leaks. So, and that's something where a potential new analyzer can also come in. And this is, what's on our roadmap, where we make WinForms app more stable, and when they're more stable, they're more secure. So that's the long-term and bigger plan behind introducing analyzers for WinForms specifically. And you will always see the specific analyzers have the prefix WFO. So immediately that is something that belongs to the WinForms runtime, and you can react accordingly and also configure them individually.
I think that's the best part about us being open source is now as we set these things up, we're going to be able to continue to advance and increase and improve analyzers and any number of things. As a matter of fact, if we start thinking about, again, the idea of a modern WinForms app, we think about the modern UI look and feel. I hear all the time how, we don't support certain things and we don't look like we are part of Windows. So Klaus is going to demonstrate some experimental UI related features.
Yeah.
He's going to go ahead and switch.
And hope that that's going to work.
Hope that it goes smoothly.
And switch on.
Yay, it's going.
Well, at least something happens. Yes. Cool.
All right. Show me dark mode and what we're talking about there.
So I've got two instances of Visual Studio. One is running a C# app. And lo and behold, one is running a
VB.
Should we mention it? I mean, the elderly amongst remember.
Are you looking at me for that?
No. I'm just talking about me, of course, because I remember. I'm glad I remember. So this is. Let's not go into what that is, but obviously this is not a dark mode app, right? I mean, and this is not a really well-designed app. There's one thing that I want to start with, and that is just, can we use dark mode in WinForms? And if we can, how do we do it? So this is the visual, not visual. It's no longer called Visual C, right? Maths would kill me.
Just the C#.
Yeah, it's C#.
C#.
So on the application object, we have two new methods/properties. The one is set color mode, and the other one is set default visual styles mode. The set color mode is taking an enum, and that enum can have dark, classic, and system. So classic obviously is the default
what
setting.
WinForms has always been.
Well, yeah, what WinForms has always been. And dark, we come to that. And then there's also system. And the system does the selection for you. So when you have activated dark mode in Windows, then the WinForms app, set to system, has dark mode. And if it is the classic setting, it will have the classic setting. So this is how you do that. And then there's also the visual styles. So now here's the motivation behind our visual styles. I mean, obviously, if you take a look at the framework WinForms apps and then go into the, let's say, Visual Basic Application Framework Designer, even in Visual Studio 2022, you will still have the option there that says activate XP visual styles.
Yes.
So, and this is like,
that was
when was XP? It's like 20 years? Is it
20 years? And it was really moving the common controls from V5 to
V5 to V6, exactly. And I mean, at the time,
that was great.
It was great, really. But I mean, seems a little bit aged, right?
Just a little bit dated.
Just a little bit aged. But it has bigger problems. So one thing, which is for me the obvious one, is think about the numeric up-down or the domain up-down controls, right? With this tiny little arrows, which are, like with a 4K high DPI app.
I cannot see them.
Yeah,
nope.
So it's a problem. But there are also other things. So there's a new, what I can never remember, WCAG 2.2?
WCAG 2.2 is the new set of recommendations or additions to the recommendations that go into accessibility in general. They were designed, WCAG is really a web standard, but a lot of international and domestic laws are saying for disability purposes, for the Americans with Disabilities Act or the European Union has the same kind of thing, that you have to be WCAG 2.2 compliant. And those compliance requirements are coming down the pipe and very important. Unfortunately, those itsy-bitsy little controls that WinForms likes to provide, that becomes problematic. And we definitely want our developers to be able to create applications that not only are compliant, but accessible.
But actually also, usable, right?
Yeah, it's very much a usability issue for me.
And so the thing is, if you take a look, for example, at a 96 DPI app, and then you have a series of text box controls, classical line of business app in WinForms, and those controls don't have any borders, then those text boxes are usually, with the standard font that we have, 16 pixels high. And it is just...
The new requirements or the new guidelines are for 24 by 24 as a minimum click target location. And what Klaus is telling us is that the text boxes aren't on their own going to meet that anymore.
Exactly. And the text box, as you know, also has a problem. You can set a margin for every text box. But have you ever tried to set a padding so that you actually have a little bit more of an area of white space before the control ends? That's not possible. So let's keep that in mind. And so I just did the first thing. My system should be, my Windows system should be by default set to dark mode. And now when I start this app again, I would expect that to be dark mode. And observe one thing. Well, I just noticed that the clock actually is too dark. It should be white. My mistake.
Those are things we're working on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, actually, this is a custom control, so I did that. This comes from working in dark mode at night, So, but the important part here is to see the scroll bar of that text box, that multi-line text box is actually also dark mode. And it's disabled right now, but we come to that later. So now this is the way that you are doing that in C#. And at the same time, so this is a disclaimer. We need to, emphasize for .NET 9. You see that we have a proc now when we disable, and then 5000, and we have 01 and 02 for .NET 9. Those features that we put out right now. So this is dark mode. This is the visual styles, and there will be async. So
we'll talk about later.
Yes. Will be under experimental
flags.
So that means that you need to tell the compiler, hey, I know that those things can probably slightly change or will be extended, but you can use them. And you don't need to necessarily, indicate that in every source file. Again, you can also, set that up globally in the editor config and say, this is fine. I know what I'm doing. I want to use those experimental features in .NET 9, set them up. It's like 5000 to 5002. Changes to do that can, again, be done via the editor directly. And that's it.
And we're really, really excited about these features. Dark mode is probably the biggest ask we've had aside from high DPI in the last, 10 years. So we're really asking for developers to play with these features, use them, work with them, and provide feedback in our GitHub repo about any issues that you have, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to make the best solutions for everybody. Note also that we are not trying to I wouldn't say step on the toes, but we're not trying to replace what the control vendors are doing with their much more configurable and themable and designable apps. We're looking for the basic WinForms app doing a basic dark mode detection.
Yes. That's very important. We will not touch theming per se, and you will not be able to change the system colors at all. So we're picking them up. We have a table that is
coming from the OS,
or coming from something that we predefined for the best accessibility experience.
Yep.
This is also something where we really need your feedback, so that you say, hey, I have tried that, but I mean, your shading in that and that, like context is slightly off. And by any means, these are things that are, developed in the open, in our WinForms repo. Then
come out and play with us, enjoy it, and play
exactly.
It, use it.
Yeah, step on my toes, and I will go in and try to fix it.
Or you can submit PRs of your own.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And we'll be happy to work with you then.
And that counts all the more for analyzers. I would like to see that.
Absolutely.
So this here is not a C# app. This is a Visual Basic app. And the thing is, in Visual Basic, we don't have well, obviously, we don't have a program.cs, right? But we don't even have a program.vb. So because those of you that have, actually still active development of Visual Basic going on know that typically we have the application events in Visual Basic. And this is the thing that where application-wide settings have been done from, I don't know. From the beginning. From the beginning, actually, right? Mm-hmm. And so there are two new things that you can use. I mean, the high DPI mode we introduced in .NET 6, was it, I think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So high DPI mode, you can programmatically set up here as well. But now also, same that counts for C# is, for Visual Basic. We set the color mode, we set the visual styles mode, and I made it a little bit easier for me just to do setting this to true. And so let's start that again and see what that makes it. So it's a little bit more describing to see that the dark mode is, or what the dark mode actually is. I'm going to go and show you particularly when it comes to forms that you want to design. So this is it's like the standard way to collect
lovely data entry form.
And so I have this little button here, which is called A11Y setting. So
the classic abbreviation for
accessibility. It's A, 11 letters, and then the Y.
It took me forever to actually know that.
Oh, I asked you. I would never know. I mean, this is like it's like part of an intelligence test, probably. So that's the classic setting. But let me put that to conform and now see what happens now. And what I did here is, and this is now, brings the visual styles mode, the global visual styles mode into play. From the moment I do that, I can set the padding for a text box, which means that the area that is displayed around the text box is bigger. And of course, the cursor itself is still in the middle, and it's like a vertical alignment that you can do then with a multi-line text box. And this is one of the most requested features that we had, mostly for accessibility reasons. But then why we were at it, and this is part of the experimental feature, I have to say, is please, can you make it look more modern so it fits better into the things we have going? We're migrating to modern UI and stuff like that. Yeah. So what can we do? And so this is one of the endeavors that we are actively approaching.
you know, there is something I see here that reminds me of another thing that we added in .NET 9. So in .NET 9, we've done a ton of new work in system.drawing, which has been brought into the WinForms runtime.
Right.
Hundreds of APIs, including being able to get hundreds of system icons that we added in this release. And something that's been really well needed is draw rounded rectangle. And we've been able to leverage that in things like this.
It was, you know, since we had that, it was actually pretty easy to make the decision to say, well, this is a different one different line of code, right?
Yep.
That becomes a rounded rectangle, and then we did the adornment painting in that way. There's also things like what we have here. So you saw the checkbox change into the toggle switch, right?
That is one of my favorite things. I have been waiting forever to see the toggle switch instead of an old style text box, because the checkbox is, again, for those of us with not great vision, kind of a little bit difficult to hit.
Exactly. So same motivation behind it. Yes, it looks better. Yes, it looks more modern. But yes, it has a bigger real estate. Is that the right way to describe it?
More padding, more space.
It's easier to hit. And I have to say, if you have your classical WinForms forms are like often containing of hundreds of controls, literally, right? And then really to hit them right is just often an accessibility challenge.
Yep.
And this is the things we're working on. So again, while we edit, we want to make it a little bit more modern, but this is in no way that we want to, you know, be competing against the third parties. If you really want to have full theming support,
we've got partners that
just doing a very great job. And also, it's absolutely clear to us that once you have used one of the big ones or the smaller ones, it just doesn't make sense to modernize 5 million lines of code of a WinForms app to do that.
All right. So we're talking a little bit about accessibility here, and I'm going to steal the stage again, because I like to do that. And we're going to move into a little bit about accessibility. Because that was part of the inspiration of Klaus's feature there with the visual styles. But I also want to make sure that our developers are armed with what we need to enable every user in our applications to succeed. And for those of you that have been around with us, it's been a journey for WinForms and accessibility. We started when WinForms was first created using Microsoft Active Accessibility, MSAA, and that managed all of our accessibility to start with. Then Windows moved to Microsoft UI Automation, and they added a few pieces to try to help us in this, be able to be automated and be able to be accessible, used with narrator and such, but it wasn't perfect. And as the requirements have grown, so has our understanding of why it's important to have accessibility. So starting in, almost 10 years ago now, we've been adding more and more built-in UIA implementation to WinForms itself. So our controls now enable all of the required patterns like expand, collapse to tell a user that they're in a control, or to let an assistive technology know that they're in a control that expands and collapses, or that is text-based and you're allowed with your tool to move character by character through that text or select ranges of text using your assistive technology. Unfortunate, it's with building an accessible application, kind of why it's important, why I am so passionate about it is because when we build and we take into consideration one accessibility need, what we're actually doing is creating something that can extend to many, to everybody. And the classic example that we always get around accessibility is ramps at the doors. People were we created ramps. It was an Americans with Disabilities Act requirement to start putting ramps in buildings and allow them to be wheelchair accessible. But what we found is that people on crutches, strollers, any number of reasons that you might need to use or might want to use that ramp instead of the stairs. When you're thinking about disabilities and designing for many, also recognize that disabilities come in three forms. They come in permanent. I do not have the use of an arm at all, ever, for example, or I have no use of vision. Then there's temporary. I broke my foot, which I actually have broken my foot. It's not fun. And then there's situational. Like my arm's full, so I need to use the little button to open the door. When you design and enable it for the one situation, it actually expands to everybody. When you're designing your application, I think the number one thing that we recommend or that you need to do is make sure that you set your accessible star properties, especially accessible name, because that becomes problematic if the controls don't have a name that assistive technology can use. Be aware, learn about the WCAG guidelines. There are hundreds of trainings and resources and information about it, and that will help you design your application. Support the Windows 11 contrast themes, which, by the way, our Visual Styles does. Windows 11 changed it from the old school high contrast to some new themes that really are helpful for those of us with vision issues. What I want to demo is the use of accessibility insights and how it can help you design an application that is more accessible than the defaults, than what you would normally get. So let me bring back my app here. I've got a second form here called Sign Up App. And let me load the designer there. For this application, it's a really simple application. There we go. We have a few controls. I'm not sure why it wanted to do that. Anyway.
Because you did not?
The demo gods.
No.
Oh, it's the...
you should have logged out and logged in before you changed the resolution.
That is a good point. Anyway, I don't think that's not what we're worried about here. So here's my sign up form, first name, last name, email, have my checkbox. I have a click here button to sign up. And let me go ahead and run that sign up app real quick. Oh, lovely.
Or it's the demo gods.
It always is the demo gods. What was the error there?
What did it say?
Just run without debugging. There we go. All right, so I've got my app running without debugging. Close everything else out so you can see it. It's a lovely app, isn't it? I put a lot of effort into my demo apps. Just kidding. I want to show one thing here. Let me launch Accessibility Insights. You know, our apps are completely opposite. Klaus has every detail, every line perfect.
No.
Pretty close. And then there's me with, let me just throw a couple of controls on the form. But you know what? That's how some apps are made, right? These are the quick and dirty apps that you throw a few controls on and collect some information.
I mean, I'm from Germany. There are rules and procedures.
Of course there are. All right. So I downloaded Accessibility Insights for Windows. You can go to accessibilityinsights.io, I think it is, or AKAMS/Accessibility Insights to download this tool. And it really runs kind of the baseline accessibility checks that you should be doing in your application. To do it, I simply go to here. I want to inspect the element. And what I want to inspect is the whole form here. The whole form. Thank you. Sometimes it's tricky to make it realize where you're wanting to do. I am going to then go to FastPass. Let me get it back to the whole form here. There we go. I'm going to run FastPass. I love it. It's really cooperating. And FastPass. What we should entire app. Let's go that way. And test.
I think it got problems with the resolution that year.
Yeah, I think it did.
So what we can do is, I mean, we can do the async stuff. We can do the async stuff first, and then you can just log out
and log back in.
You know, try it again if you want to.
The one other thing that I can show you here. So if you run FastPass, it's going to tell you, oh my goodness, there's a lot of problems with these text boxes because they don't have names. They don't have accessible names. With the button, something that you may want to do, I thought I had that turned off. Something that you may want to do is check your contrast ratios, because contrast ratios are really important. I'm going to check that the color of my button and the contrast with the color of my N here. And in this case, oh, that's the blue. I didn't want blue. I wanted, well, let's go with the contrast of the rest of the form. And as you can see, I fail the color contrast ratios because I don't meet the guidelines. Change the color, these will go green. You want to have as much contrast between the button and the background so that people can find it easily when they have vision issues. But we are running a little bit behind, so I want to come out of here and move into performant and responsive, because I think we have all had the situation where your app becomes unresponsive for any number of reasons. And we also know that the operating system is moving to a much more asynchronous way of operating.
Show the typical screenshot that we have there.
I have that there. Let me see if I can make it big enough.
And this is something,
we've seen this.
Right?
Everybody's seen it grayed out, not responding.
This is exactly what we have before. So what do you say? An endless loop in an event, is that something that you would do in a WinForms app? No one?
There we go.
Exactly. I would do it.
So what do you do now instead?
Let's show endless loops in events. An event handler. So who of you know the new new periodic timer in .NET? Anybody heard of that one?
Cool new feature in .NET.
It's actually, I think it was .NET 6. So what that thing does is actually, I mean, it's not that we not have enough timers in the .NET library, right? But this thing is really cool. So the periodic timer works like this. Do you see it? Yes.
Yes, it's all working.
So you instantiate it. You say how often it, should fire. Mm-hmm. And then you enter an endless loop. And just to see, this is really a click event, right? So, and then I'm awaiting the next tick asynchronously. And then I do whatever I need to do. But that, preferably, you should also do asynchronously. But then in this case, I have a write line async. And then I also have at the very, bottom of the app.
This is the one I love.
Yeah. A little, what is it? A two-strip label. Is it called like that? Two-strip label, I think. Yeah, there's so long the type names. And which we are then invoking. And so let's go to the app and see if we can actually call that thing. So that would be the async sync write lines. And yes, we're counting, right? But we're not only counting. So this thing is running now.
It's still functional.
And since we're waiting, right? It's completely asynchronous. The UI thread is just free, and it can pump messages. And with this approach, there won't be any not respondents because, well, the message loop is just running freely. And of course, you can set it up and then invoke it again and invoke it again and invoke it again. And sure, it's working because then it's asynchronous. So they can
We're not
even
waiting
then
for one to
share.
finish before
Yeah.
we start the next one.
So now, but what's important is with invoke async. I mean, it's giving you the hint of the async. The question is now, so what is actually async? First of all, what you pass to invoke async is awaited. But then what you can also do with the overloads of invoke async is you can pass a task of T and also a function of T, so that you can actually not only await the kickoff, but then you can also await or let the system await the invocation. So both of those are valid. And I mean, this is now a little bit of a stilted thing. So I have here now the right line delayed async. It was very, very late. So it's not a very creative naming here. But what it does basically is I fire up a task.run. So this is really like async, and have this inner thing run on a thread loop. On thread loop? That doesn't exist. On a thread, on a thread pool thread, like on a task. And so that's the second one then. So this is the async write lines. And of course, I can also combine this. And yeah, so
what was the motivation for us to really get into async? Why invest in this? And by the way, this is another experimental feature in .NET 9, so you'll need to enable it the same way that Klaus mentioned for the other features.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things, and let's switch to C# again, is certainly that we want the UIs also in WinForms to be responsive. And the thing is that that WinForms itself is not something that is not responsive by design. Actually, I mean, we had begin invoke for controls from the beginning. It was just so awkward and so, in the end, complicated to handle and to delegate events and marshal exceptions and what have you, that it was much fun. But I mean, what we want to do is, and you know what? We forgot something to demo in the dark mode.
Well, we better hurry up.
Oh, it's just one thing. Do you remember what it was?
The title bar.
Yes, we have a title bar. So along with the dark mode, we not only have dark modes then for the controls. When you take a look at like modern apps, you also have always the option to configure the colors of the Windows title bar, the title text, how the accent colors around are there. And I mean, while we at both like dark mode and async, this is a nice demo for that. It's a little bit subtle, but if you take a look at the title bar of the WinForms app, you see that the colors changing, like blending in through all the colors they are. But then, of course, it is about, even if the app is doing something very heavily that also needs to render, then you still want the app to be, continue reacting. So let's just have, fire up, what is it, like 30 tasks and draw
a spiral
into the same device context, so into the same surface with, what do we have here, like 20 different graphics objects all at the same time, no invoke necessary. And
can you move your form?
Pardon? Oh, yeah, let's do that again. So I'm not completely perfect in, I can resize, but I'm not doing a very good job in like, really painting I should have done a paint background. I didn't do it.
That's okay.
But I mean, still.
The point is the app is still responsive. Yes. You're not getting that white screen.
Exactly. So it is, you see, it is still painting, and it's all because of invoke async and, the various overloads that we have there.
All right. In the last 5 minutes. Yes.
Really 5 minutes. Okay. Now, one really, really quick thing that I want to show, and now let's go back to the Visual Basic app. Thank you to set me so under stress, boss. Because Merrie is my boss, by the way. So there's one thing that I want to to show. And because this like tool windows here at the side, right?
Ah, yes.
They're not there by accident. What I can do is I can, like, obviously I can close them, and then I can, like, open them again and, do this, and then they're, appearing there. And every time I do that, you see in the info line, there's something happening, right? So I just want to point out how I did that. So along with control.invoke async, we aim also to introduce is form show async and form show dialog async. And then we should also mention task dialog, show dialog async. So,
yep.
But here's the thing. So not only does that make WinForms more compatible to other UI stacks, because if you for example, if you want to build a view model and use that for a .NET MAUI app, or a .NET a WPF or WinUI app, with the new command binding features that we introduced in .NET 7, and we don't want to talk about that. You can also then, have probably a UI service for WinForms, a dedicated one, that's then using the asynchronous versions of all those like show things. And so those become more compatible. But it's not only that, and this is the quick one, and I'm wrapping up really quickly. So let's go into the code that did this handling, right? So in the form load that I have here, somewhere at the beginning, I'm setting up, a couple of things, and then I'm just calling out of the form load await handle tool window async. So here's what that does. The handle tool window async is iterating through these 4 menu items that we have in the menu item view. And then it just creates a task completion source for each menu item. And also it captures the task for showing the tool window. Mm-hmm. And so we have then, for each tool window, 2 tasks. One that completes when the user clicked the menu item, and one that completes when the form closes. But all those return tasks. And these lists, like the tool window tasks, is where we have all the tasks in. So this is what we're building up. And then the actual handling of closing the tool windows, opening the tool windows, and then also reacting on what the user does is just this endless loop. So we have the list of all the tasks, and we're just waiting that one of them finishes. And when that happens, we just look up what kind of task was pretty much finishing. And since we before set up what's going to happen when someone pressed that item, we are in that moment also building up the list of the tasks again. And then with a new list of tasks, we just keep looping, and that's it. So it's like a 5 lines of code where we have the whole managing of the tool windows, and I think that's a benefit of like show async that opens
really
up
helpful.
Really good designs and really responsive designs, most of all.
And designs that can be shared with other components in your enterprise.
Yes.
The last piece we wanted to talk about, and I'm not even going to go back to the PowerPoint, we're going to stay over with Klaus's demo, is that modern applications really nowadays need interaction with AI. And Klaus has a demo here of kind of one of our ideas around how we might use, say, semantic kernel, leveraging the async work that has already been demoed to do something fun. And this will be kind of our last little demo as we close it out.
Yes. So just a small introduction to semantic kernel. This is the easiest way, simplified way to describe it. I would say, ChatGPT. semantic kernel. So what I say now, I would be probably attacked by a couple of our colleagues. But the easiest way to think of it is have ChatGPT in your own apps. And, send off the requests, send off the prompt, if you will. And let that thing do something and then get a response. And then the way you're handling with a little bit of creativity is then something that you can also build in your WinForms apps. But don't think of it necessarily. And this is something where we need to change our mindsets a little bit, I think. We can, I think, if we think a little bit, more creatively out of the box with that, even in our 10 or 15-year-old apps really deliver very interesting benefits for our or for your customers, actually. So I would show that really quickly. This is more or less a mock app where I can add tasks with. But then
the to-do list the boss gives them.
Yes. So, but there are like two things that I always want to add, or is part of a new task, is when's the task due, and then also there's the neat description that I want to have. So usually I would say, okay, this task will be due. What date is today? That means that 8 and 9 and I need to be very careful because this is like something I wrote
a month ago.
Well, yeah, and then updated it with the like latest bits, and it's a little bit fragile, to be honest, but it'll work. So due date, and then the task could be remember. I have a dog that is very old. His name is Aslan. Remember to get the mats for Aslan. Okay, so nothing bad here. So now my wife comes home and says, hey, you know what? You need to get Aslan's mats
on next Thursday.
Next Thursday, exactly. So let's put here in next Thursday. Okay. We're connecting to OpenAI in that case. We're saying, hey, today is this day, and this is the date that I want to have. I just, typed in next Thursday.
What about Christmas?
Just Christmas?
Oh, okay. How about Boxing Day?
Oh, not that one again. Okay, let's try Boxing Day, because that is
a little bit more obscure.
Boxing Day. I mean, Merrie had to tell me what Boxing Day is. I didn't know the term. Boxing Day. Let's try to do it. Boxing Day is hey. Yes. Okay, now that we didn't stage it, please throw just one date description to me.
Anything.
Halloween. Oh God, how do you write Halloween?
Luckily, you're getting the autocorrect there.
Is that?
Yep.
Okay, Halloween is?
October 31st.
Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, so.
The idea is a little bit of creative thinking. What?
Let's do one thing more.
Uh-oh.
Bill Gates' birthday.
Bill Gates' birthday, all right.
Bill Gates, and I have no idea Bill Gates' birthday. Is that correct?
That is I believe that's correct.
Okay, so, but then of course, I mean, if you are bilingual and I am, I mean, I can do a little bit of English and I can do some version of German. That's almost a challenge when it comes to certain, like special talk. So when I do now, so what is Christmas in German is Weihnachten. Let's try Weihnachten.
So the point is with creativity. You want one more?
One more.
You need to do one more?
One more. Sorry, I need to do one more because it's so exciting. So because I am
Can you tell he
German,
loves what he does?
Okay, let's do this. Remember to buy maths for Aslan. Let's see what that does, huh? Is that cool or what? Okay, so, and one last thing. Denk daran.
You've got a bilingual to-do app.
What is maths in German?
I have no idea. Medicine?
Medizin, ja. Medizin für Aslan zu kaufen. And remember to buy medicine for Aslan. So I think that is something that really fits in so many scenarios for classical WinForms apps, and that gives you so much benefit, or gives your customers so much benefit. I'm sorry, I'm getting excited about that.
There's just with the creativity that we've got, that all of our developers have, we can really do some amazing things.
Yes.
All right. We are a little bit over. So what I want to do is just say thank you so much for joining us. We will be around for Q&A, and we will be at the lunch in 15 minutes or 10 minutes. I will be giving the organizers these slides, so we'll have some resources for you. And please, again, thank you so much for joining us. Please do fill out the survey, and we'll see you at lunch. Thanks.